Welcome back. It's Wednesday, November 26th, and we have a very significant day of very dangerous fire weather developing across New South Wales. In fact, we have a catastrophic fire danger rating forecast for the Central Plains in New South Wales, which is actually the second time in about 2 years that such a high level of fire danger has been rated. And this is as a result of a number of conditions coming together today to develop into some very dangerous conditions for those in the affected regions. In today's forecast, we're going to break down everything you need to know with this developing fire weather. Starting off by taking a look at the Bureau of Meteorology's official fire weather forecast, we can see that they have outlined a catastrophic fire danger risk in the Central Plains of New South Wales. This actually includes the population centres of Parkes and Dubbo, which are obviously fairly large towns with a large amount of people, and then a more broad expanse on the outside of the red area. We have a portion that is outlined in orange, which represents the potential for extreme fire danger conditions within these regions, and this actually includes the Sydney Metro. So a large amount of New South Wales's population will be under the gun today for some very dangerous fire weather conditions, and these conditions will be conducive to the development and rapid spread of fire, as well as erratic and dangerous conditions that will make control of these fires very difficult. If we bring up the European model, we can get an idea of what exactly is driving this fire danger today. And we can see here, obviously outlined in the red, orange, and pink colors, the pinks and the reds obviously indicating the hottest temperatures. We have a large expanse, especially across New South Wales, but really across at least central and eastern portions of the country, of some very hot, dry air that is being advected into the New South Wales region. And this is driven by northerly winds ahead of a cold front that is actually scraping the coast of Victoria. And these northerly winds are dragging down that really hot, dry air from central Australia and pushing it into New South Wales. Now, if we look at the Parkes and Dubbo region, which is where the greatest threat for fire spread will occur today in the catastrophic region, we can expect daytime peak temperatures around 35 to 36 degrees. But certainly if you expand outward to Sydney or the Sydney Metro, temperatures there will also be reaching around the mid-30s. In fact, Sydney's forecast temperature today, or max forecast temperature today, is around 36 degrees. So certainly some warm conditions across a very large expanse of New South Wales. And these really hot and dry conditions will really help to preheat any available fuel for ignition today. Now, we previously mentioned that there will be a huge amount of very, very dry air across New South Wales today, and we can see that here in the model. This is the relative humidity forecast, and we can see it by around peak heating time. So this is mid-afternoon hours to the later afternoon. The relative humidity values here are reaching around 14 to 15%, especially across that highest risk area through Parkes and Dubbo. And this actually also extends into the Sydney metro area. So a huge amount of New South Wales's population will actually be under the influence of some very dry air today, as well as that persistent, very dry heating that will occur throughout the day. And this will really set the stage for some erratic fire behavior in combination with some other conditions. Now, our greatest concern for fire risk today is actually driven by the winds. And as we mentioned before, there is a cold front that is scraping the southern portions of the country, or just scraping the Victorian border. So it's particularly low, at least in reference to the country, but it will still have considerable effects into New South Wales, and this will be as a result of those northerly winds ahead of the frontal border that are dragging that hot air down, as we spoke about. But additionally, this is also going to cause some very powerful wind gusts to develop across this region. Now, we can see as we drag this model out, by around early afternoon hours in New South Wales, heading into the later afternoon, there's a huge expanse of very powerful wind gusts that are expected to develop across the higher risk areas. Now, Parkes and Dubbo are looking at potential peak wind gusts of around 75 kilometers an hour, but there's also an expanse of much higher wind gusts, particularly around the ACT Canberra region, and then expanding outward a little bit north and south of this border, actually into New South Wales, and it actually expands west toward Griffith. And some of these wind gusts could actually be pushing near 100 kilometers an hour, especially around that ACT region, where the terrain is more elevated. And then there is also some indication just on the Sydney coastal strip that some of these gusts could also be reaching 100 kilometers an hour, but certainly more through the southern portion of New South Wales and the ACT that the expanse of the strongest winds is greatest. And these wind gusts are actually quite substantial around the Canberra region. 100 kilometers an hour is very dangerous for fire spread, but Nonetheless, the greatest risk area is actually in the catastrophic region around Parkes, Forbes and Dubbo. And although the peak wind gust strength in New South Wales is not actually centered on Parkes and Dubbo, 75 km/h wind gusts in this region will still generate a very significant danger for rapid and erratic fire spread, and we obviously know that being outlined in the catastrophic region. And some of these areas have actually already been impacted by numerous lightning strikes over the last 24 hours as thunderstorms move through. And actually, as we are recording this, there are a number of ongoing higher based or elevated thunderstorms that are actually moving across the region with very little rainfall, and they will actually likely contain damaging wind gusts. So some of these storms that have moved through and are currently moving through are generating the potential for lightning strike ignitions across these regions. So the increased risk of fire already, just by the potential for ignitions to occur through lightning strikes, as well as the already dangerously elevated fire weather conditions being in catastrophic across this region, will set the stage for a very dangerous day of fire weather in the Parkes and Dubbo. But this really extends also to the outskirts of that. Certainly there's another 10 forecast districts bordering the highest risk area that are also in extreme, and certainly something not to just disregard, because the highlight of the day is obviously the red area. But extreme fire danger will still present a very significant threat to both life and property for anyone in these areas, especially when those fires do initiate later today, if they do occur, which they are probably pretty likely given that the number of lightning strikes that have occurred and are currently pushing through the region. So do expect fires to initiate within these regions today, and they will spread and very rapidly and will be very difficult to control, especially in combination with these very powerful wind gusts ripping across the region. They'll be near impossible to control, at least in the short term. But also the Sydney Metro will be under the gun for potential fires to develop today, and they won't be comparatively less severe compared to the more western portions of New South Wales either. The relative humidity values, as we saw before, are also considerably low in the Sydney Metro. The daytime temperatures will be very hot, and the wind gusts could actually be some of the highest in New South Wales, especially as those winds begin to rip up the coastal strip. We can obviously see here in Sydney, as we spoke about, those gusts reaching near 100 kilometers an hour. So a huge portion of the population really need to be aware today for these very dangerous fire weather conditions to develop. You need to have a plan and be ready to act fast when these fires do initiate, as well as listening to local emergency services ahead of time, as well as their live updates and emergency information on any developing fires. And if we also turn our attention quickly to the portions of northeastern New South Wales, we can be expecting some very different impacts here as well. In fact, we have a 30% red area outlined by the Bureau of Meteorology, outlining the probability of severe thunderstorms being likely within this region. And some of the thunderstorms here could actually be possible to develop into higher end severe thunderstorms. So we would be expecting supercells potentially developing through this region. And some of these storms would actually be capable of producing giant hailstones and destructive winds. So hailstones in excess of 5 centimeters and wind gusts in excess of 125 kilometers an hour. And we can see here by early afternoon that these thunderstorms begin to develop out west, and they continue to track to the eastern portions of New South Wales, especially around that Tenterfield, Tamworth and Guyra regions. We can see some of these thunderstorms become particularly organized here on the simulated radar reflectivity tracking to the northeast. Some of these storms are indicated here as being discrete supercells that will be capable of producing those higher end severe hazards that we spoke about just now, the giant hailstones and destructive winds. So certainly something to watch if you are in northeastern New South Wales, although there is also a small probability that some of these storms could actually end up in southern portions of southeastern Queensland, although the risk area is primarily centered around northeastern New South Wales, and there likely won't be a huge expanse of thunderstorm activity ongoing, but some of the thunderstorms that could initiate could certainly become higher end organized severe thunderstorms that would be capable of producing those effects across these population centers, really spanning from sort of Port Macquarie to the north, really near the southeastern Queensland border. weather. And that's pretty much going to do it for today's forecast on these developing fire weather conditions across New South Wales. We'll continue to provide live coverage and updates on the Facebook page. Head over there if you don't already follow Outbreak Weather. We continue to cover developing or ongoing severe weather across the country. If you also are new here, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps to push us out in the algorithm and get this information out to those who need it, as well as turn on notifications for the videos. Appreciate you watching this video, and we'll be back for the forecast tomorrow.